Sudhirji, welcome to Chandigarh and welcome to the workshop and the Chandigarh Lalit Kala Academy's lecture, as well as you're going to present a lecture today, as well as you conducted a workshop with 9 young artists. So, but we want to talk to you about Sudhir Patwardhan, the painter, the person, the poet and the radiologist in all. So you are all rolled into one, which is really unique. So if you could talk a little about your journey from the start to now, and of course the experiences that have shaped your work, as well as you as a medicine person and a painter, both.
Thank you. The start was in medical college when I was studying medicine.
Where was this?
This was in Pune in the Armed Forces Medical College.
Oh, the FMC. Okay.
Yes, the FMC.
Okay.
So I used to paint before that. I mean, I used to mainly draw and sketch. I liked that.
Right.
But somewhere around that time, I felt the need to kind of do more work in painting.
Gee. This was in college while
in college
studying.
while I was studying. I was staying in the hostel, and it so happened that there were a few friends who were doing painting. So with them, I used to go out, started going out for landscapes and things like that. But mainly, it was a period of more reading, you know, and that is what kind of, I think, led me to make up my mind that I want to follow this more seriously and want to be a painter.
Now, when you say reading, what kind of reading? Is this reading outside or reading books or reading everything around you?
Yes, mainly novels and being introduced to literature that I had not come across earlier. At that time, apart from like the Russian novelists and things like that, there was also people like Sartre and Camus who were very influential, and Sartre in particularly, I think the idea of commitment as an artist, you know, that attracted me. That there is such a thing as an artistic commitment. And along with that, there was also the influence of Marxism. That was a period around 66, 67 when many places around the world were in turmoil, and you know. So, and one was continuously reading about student protests, and in India there were farmer protests, Adivasi protests. It was a period when I think the idea of Nehruvian idea of India had started to crack up a bit. So that also influenced, and these two kinds of streams of thinking came together, and as a Marxist later on, and as a generally left intellectual and a committed intellectual, you know. So that was the attraction mainly.
That was the shaping.
That was the shaping of my kind of.
And so was it tough, you know, doing painting as well as, because studying medicine is a tough process. So how did you manage to balance the two while at college, and did it take a lot of effort from you, considering that you did not come from a trained art school and it was completely self-learned as well as self-observed? So how did that process take place?
I think you know, I started with books and things like that, trying to learn to paint. Also, as I mentioned, these friends, some of them were more progressed in technique and things like that than me.
So you shared?
So I shared as we worked together. And there is an art school in Pune, Abhinav Kala Mandir, where they ran some evening and hobby classes kind of thing. So that was my kind of slightly oblique connection with formal training. But I did come across some very useful books, you know, basically, and which I found, and also looking at reproductions. You know, at that time one could buy small world art, you know, the small format books which one could buy for like 3.5 rupees or something like that, unbelievable now. But so looking at a lot of painters' work and things like that really molded me.
And any major influences as far as painters are concerned?
Well, around that time, the usual Impressionists, Van Gogh, Cézanne, Gauguin, had not yet progressed to digesting Picasso that much, but the initial, because I was interested in landscape and thing, but quite soon the idea that the human body is something that interests me as a painter, kind of more or less took shape. And since then Daumier was someone I loved, and then there were many. As I went along, I saw more, liked more.
So this was the start of a long journey. So what, and after college, of course, you decided to become a full-time radiologist. So how did that complement your painting? Because that's also a study of the human body, of course, with a more technical and scientific way.
Yes.
But I'm sure, and it seems that it reflects in your work as well. And how do these two genres, which are completely opposite, or?
Well, initially, actually, radiology was not my first choice, and I was, as I said, because of the reading and because of the reading of Freud and things like that, I had become interested in psychiatry, and I was definitely wanting to come to Bombay from Pune. Because I wanted to see more exhibitions, etc. And I knew that one had to be in Bombay if one wanted to continue wanting to be an artist. So, but I came with the idea that maybe I could follow house post and things like that in psychiatry. Around that time, I have a radiologist uncle, and he talked to me about my like and dislike. He was very sympathetic about my wanting to be a painter. And he pointed out to me that two strong loves, it's difficult to make them exist side by side. But if I really love painting, then psychiatry is going to be too demanding to balance. And he, of course, had some personal interest that he wanted me to look after his second radiology clinic, but that was like, it was fortunate for me that he pointed this out, and I realized that maybe radiology, which is less demanding profession, you can manage your hours more easily, and even mentally it's not like you get that close to, as psychiatry. And that is how I came to radiology. But once I took it up, I started enjoying it because, as you say, it was such a visual medium, and I realized that being a painter, or aspiring to be a painter, and having a certain kind of visual sensibility, in fact, helped my radiology too. Because I imagined, I don't know, but I imagined that I could detect tonal differences more acutely, in a sense. I don't know if it's true or not. But
and did it make you a more compassionate doctor also? The fact that you were a painter and you were looking at life more creatively and artistically. Did you feel that you're more?
I think it's worked both ways.
Both ways.
Being a doctor influencing my being a painter, and being a painter influencing my medicine or my relationship with patients, I would say. But the way I've thought it mainly is how being a doctor, coming in contact with patients regularly, people who come to you with some problem and invest certain faith and certain power in you over themselves. And how you make use of this is the challenge before a doctor. It can be misused in subtle ways, in more gross ways. But as a painter, I was thinking, apart from how I deal with them as a doctor, as a painter, I was thinking that a painter is in a similar position, and especially a painter of people, where I was representing people, I was making images of people, and that gave me a certain power. I was being a spokesman. I was speaking on behalf of people, these people. And so what I said, in a sense, it would be my belief or my idea or my statement, but even then it had to respect what they thought of themselves also.
Right.
So in that sense, the autonomy of the individual had to play a great part, and that element, I think, in my work, the consciousness of that element comes from being humbled by this position of being a doctor.
Right, that's very interesting. And in the beginning you talked about the responsibility of an artist and how you were always influenced by that philosophy.
Yes.
So this also of course translates into exactly what you paint also.
Very true, yes.
Okay. And so which brings us to the point that you paint the life of ordinary people, the city of Mumbai, the streets, the cafes, the mills, and people in general in Mumbai. So what was it that connected to you to people as a painter, so that you have just kept it, it's become a lifelong passion. And also your paintings are of ordinary people, but they are extraordinary in the sense that they show people in light which shows them with a lot of dignity. There's a lot of strength and courage, and it's not like I would say you're not sympathizing with their common life or their common beliefs or their life of hardships as well, but you lend them a character which is extraordinary. So what goes in your mind? What are your beliefs and values which translate onto the canvas? And even for an onlooker like me who hasn't studied art, you want to look beyond that expression. You want to go beyond that railway platform or train or cafe, or just that visual of these two women standing on that little terrace of theirs, and where you can see the little urban landscape of Mumbai. They're very images which stay in your mind, or this man who's weaving with a blanket, or
that's right, yeah.
There's a certain connect with them which is which you don't find in if I may say so, abstract work, which takes this instant relationship with the image. I know it's a long question, but
yes, no, it's interesting. It's an interesting question, and there are many kind of interrelated
many
points,
dimensions to this.
many dimensions to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that I've never approached people with a feeling of pity, and when you say sympathy, I think there is probably empathy and sympathy in a sense, but not pity. So, but what takes me to these people in the first place, I come from middle class, in a Maharashtrian middle class family would essentially be defined as a lower middle class family. I mean, it's like, but we've seen the ordinary people as our own people. It's not that you put yourself above the class below you, because you're not that far from them. So right from childhood, it's not as if, so these are people that you interact with daily and things like that. Then I think the essential element of an ideological view of Marxism, of looking at the working class in a certain way. That was, as I said, one of the early influences in the 70s on my thinking and my work. So that brought to focus my need to paint a certain class. So at that time, I would identify it as if I was painting the working class and not say that I'm painting just ordinary people. I would say this specifically, this is a kind of industrial, urban, working class that I'm painting. So there was an ideological intention behind that. Later, when that intention became less strong and it became more free, then it became about, again, it reverted back to being about ordinary people.
Right.
You know, they could be middle class people, they could be anyone one sees in the street and things like that. So this connection I've never felt comfortable about. I mean, I am comfortable with painting what I see around me, essentially. And if I'm painting these people who I don't see as very different from my own class, though of course there are differences, I am not, when I see them, when I see myself as a spokesman for them, I do not want to be a spokesman on their behalf, taking their complaints, let us say,
Yes.
to someone else.
Okay.
So I am not painting for the third person, telling them, look at these people,
Do something for them.
do something. That is not. So
No.
it's not protest art, and it's not that kind of. The intention is to take back the image to these people themselves, and to see that they have this in them.
Okay.
So when you mentioned earlier that there is a kind of strength,
Dignity.
dignity, so these are the elements that I want to draw out.
Okay.
So in spite of what they're living through, in spite of what their conditions are, what I want to draw out from the image is this element of strength, dignity, the will to live as human beings. And while doing this, it also kind of gives me something. It adds to my
Okay.
personality in a sense, you know, to be able to do this through your work.
Okay. So it gives value to your life
Yes.
and work as
Yes.
well. So where does it, where do you find your paintings, or your paintings find you? How does it go?
Yeah.
Like there's so many images of cafes and railway stations and buses and the
Yes.
urban Mumbai. So what is it? Do you set out to find your muse, or does it come to
Yeah.
you?
Well, it happens in many ways. It can happen in surprising ways, it can happen in a flash, it can happen over months. Essentially, my kind of what I do, or what I used to do right from the time I moved to Bombay, is to roam the streets and travel in the train, travel in the buses, sit at Irani cafes, and partake in the daily bustle of the city.
Right.
Yeah, making sketches at that time.
Okay.
Later, I started taking photographs.
Okay.
You know, so but essentially recording what was happening around me in different ways, and then these become the source material of in the studio. These become the source material. The ways in which an image or something that you have seen becomes a painting is quite complex. It can be happen in various ways, because essentially a painting is also about space, and it's about presences within a space. So many times that is something that needs to be constructed. You know, it doesn't, I mean, you see a face and suddenly you feel attracted to it and you record it, and that's with you. Or you see someone bending in a certain way, or a laborer picking up something, and that attracts you and you note it.
Okay. Okay.
But for this to become a painting, a context has to be given, something has to be built around it.
Okay.
So these things are then the ways in which one develops the image in one's mind.
Okay.
It can take a long time, it may work, may not work. So this is the principal way in which, you know, as things get more complex, then there are various other things that come to mind, and you would like to go to a particular area for a certain reasons. You've seen something happening in a particular, some changes, for example a certain suburb, where you know that the city is transforming itself in certain ways, and then you want to make a study of this, you want to see this happen.
Right.
So you go there again and again over years or months. So then there is a project in your mind that you're concentrating. It's not random roaming the streets. You're going to a certain area to see what is happening in this area.
Okay.
You know, so it might be something like that.
Right. Right.
And there's of course a third kind of thing that happens sometimes, rarely, but it does happen sometimes, where a kind of an image, a finished painting is given to you in an instant, you know. It's just that something about what you see is already complete.
Okay.
It says what it needs to say, and then as an artist your work is to just make the painting. You know.
And if you could say name any of such works which have come to you like a complete
Yeah,
painting?
well, there's one work called Father and Son.
Okay.
It's the image of the back of adult holding a baby. So you see part of the baby, the head and the legs on both sides of the torso of the man. The painting is a bare-bodied man, but what I did see when I was riding in an auto rickshaw, and suddenly in front of us this man ran across and stepped up on the divider between the roads before he could cross over to the other side. And it was not a very small baby, it's a toddler, but obviously because he was crossing the road, he picked him up in that way, and that image meant a lot, you know.
Yes.
The obvious things are, of course, the love and the care and man and baby and child. But there's also, I mean, when you start working on it, there's also undercurrents of what touched my mind and then gave it a certain tension or a dimension that it could also be a sacrificial thing, I mean, because the way in which a lamb often is held and taken by someone, so it becomes strange and you know also difficult to reconcile.
Yes.
But that's one of the things that art is continuously trying to do: reconcile opposites, reconcile contradictions, because you're constantly faced with them.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely. So is it important for you as a painter to go beyond the beauty or the aesthetics of art and always find a context and a philosophy in the work? Or sometimes does it just become a beautiful painting? Or for you as an artist, is it important that your viewer or your spectator or your audience sees what you see? Or no, you are not egoistic about that? Any context that when you paint, you have a context.
Yes.
But when I see your painting, I may not have the same context.
That's true.
Does it bother you?
No,
do you
I think
paint
each.
with that perspective in mind?
I think each viewer comes with his own personal context to the work. I think the work needs to carry that kind of, in a sense, depth, where different contexts, different readings are possible.
Yes.
They do not necessarily contradict each other.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
But they are in a sense additive, and the same person coming to a painting, I mean, I have experienced that with great works of art, that you go to a work again and again and every time it changes, you know. So you bring different experiences, so it's not just that different people will bring different experiences to a work, but the same person can also bring so it happens all the time. It's one of the great things about art, I mean, so it's not that I want it to be restricted to one context. So,
but are there works which are like, for when we write, there are some stories which are absolutely flow.
Yes.
They are effortless. You know, they come straight from the head and heart.
Yes.
But for a painter, are there paintings which are really laborious and?
Oh yeah, most of them are.
But if you were to talk about a few which you thought that you just wanted to give up, but finally ended up as you felt were like some of your favorite babies.
There have been many actually, you know, where they become very difficult. They progress for a little while and then they get into the wrong track, and then to retrieve them becomes difficult. So all kinds of things happen. And also you may start with certain things and end up doing something entirely different with that painting. You know, that too can happen. So pathways open up as you're working, and sometimes they close and frustrate you. So all this does happen. And coming back to the question of beauty that you raised a little earlier, of course we all know that, you know, each one's definition and what each one is looking for. But I do think that I'm striving for beauty. I do think that I want my paintings to be beautiful. Then, of course, it's question, what do I mean by being beautiful? So, I don't know if it really covers my, you know, what I really think and feel in all aspects. But one of the ideas that I have is that it's like a bowl, and a bowl that can hold most to the brim without overflowing. So most suffering, most happiness, most of everything. So a bowl that will hold most of this without allowing it to overflow, spill. That kind of a bowl is a beautiful bowl, and that is the kind of beauty that one seeks.
Right,
you know?
right. When you paint.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. You are you call yourself a people's painter, but the urban landscape of Mumbai is not very far from your paintings.
Yes.
In little ways, in subtle ways, it always is connected to your people, to your images.
Yes.
So how tough is it from concrete to human and then blending it together, but without making it so obvious? It's like I said, it flows, it just blends so beautifully that you can't separate the two from each other, which I feel is such a unique aspect of your work, because
Yes.
the emergence or the emergence of the two together. So
Yeah.
how do you see man and city, man and building, man and, you know,
Yes.
as a painter, as a human being, and which finds way in your work?
I think you've put the question very well and very beautifully, and it kind of makes me think of that it has been very difficult.
I'm sure, because a city like Mumbai, I would still
Yes.
connect with a city like Chandigarh, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
But
And it has been difficult in different ways at different times.
yeah, exactly. I'm
You
sure.
know?
Probably 15 years pehle it wasn't. It was
Yes.
different, and now it must be
Yes.
completely different.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
you and your work also have changed with these
I think so.
settings. And
I think so. You
So
know?
how did it go?
Well, I've thought of it in a way in which, I've tried to formulate what has happened to my seeing the city in different ways. And I realized that I've seen it in like the first impact of the city when I moved to Bombay.
From Pune. Must be so different. It must
was
be a
a
shock.
culture shock. Yeah, absolutely. And the crowds and the traveling and the bustle and the size.
Yeah.
And just the size of the city, which
And
never
it's
ends. You know, you travel and travel, and
constantly on the move. I
it's
mean,
constantly
sometimes
on the move,
just seeing it is tiring.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It can
That's true.
fatigues you that, oh
That's
God,
true.
how can people go on like this all the
Yes, that's true. And my taking in of the city at that time was like a street level taking in.
time? Yes, yes.
You know?
You were much younger.
So
and
I was
you were
much
more,
younger,
Yeah.
and I was kind of interested in it, looking at the city and the people in it at close quarters. So as you said earlier, sitting in the cafe, walking the streets, sitting in the train, whatever. So this was the mode in which they came, and within this mode, the figure and his surroundings came to me as in a sense, one was trying to make the human presence is always, I won't say disruptive, but it's almost close to being disruptive, but it's a presence that changes things around it.
It overpowers at times.
Yes,
Yeah,
it does.
yeah,
So you can't place a figure
No.
in a landscape without changing the landscape, you know.
So
And
true.
the city is like that, and the difficult part is that there are thousands of people there.
Hanji.
So
Absolutely.
each person is seeking his own space.
Yeah.
So within a painting which has, say, 5 figures, there are 5 presences which are seeking space.
Ji.
Now, you can't paint a flat wall behind them and
Completely.
expect all those 5 to merge with that wall.
Right.
You got to fragment that wall in various ways. You have to change perspectives in various ways, so that those spaces, the friction between those spaces and those presences,
Okay.
and the connections between those presences becomes established.
Right.
So this is the kind of struggle in the early work where one is trying to. Then there was a period when I moved away, in the sense I moved further from the street level and was seeking a more panoramic view of the city.
Okay.
So there are images where the city is seen from far.
Yes. Yes.
Here the figures are small in size and they become like in a miniature, small actors on a stage. Now here the conflicts and tensions between the figures are not that intense. So I have like a God's eye view of seeing this whole thing, like a narrative unfolding.
Right.
So that's a different relationship. In recent years, the way Bombay has been changing, it's become even more difficult, or it's become more difficult for me to relate to it at street level. Frankly, it's become too overpowering, and the fractures are too strong, and one has grown old. One doesn't have the same kind of energy.
Right.
So I've tried various ways in which to contain the city in the work. One of them has been to withdraw within home
Okay.
and to see the city from a protected space of your home and look at it from the window. So you frame a fragment of the city. So you're trying to deal here with the city fragment by fragment.
Right. Right.
So that's one way that I've tried. I'm trying to re-enter the city, I need to. But I have to admit that it is difficult to relate to Bombay at a human level now. Maybe for a generation who have seen
What it
another kind of thing, maybe for the new people, a newer generation is just the naturally given thing. But it is. I don't know. I'm rambling a bit.
No. So has, of course, you talked about the city changing and, of course, how your perspective changed also. But has your, over the years, has your philosophy of art and of what you paint and how you see things and the people, have they also changed? Because we have also, in a sense, you talked about the younger generation.
Yes.
So has
That's true.
that entire process also changed, or because you did mention
Yes.
once that every period influences a painter and
Yes.
his or her work.
Yes.
So how has have you seen those
Yes.
changes? Also
There have been
in your work?
changes at various kinds of levels. One of the levels is the kind of artistic influences that come to play a part.
Haji.
So initially, when I was painting the kind of strong male body, the working class, and people on the street and things like that, there's one kind of, there were many influences, leisure and others, and generally expressionist works, Kathak and of course the work of Bhupen and Giv Patel and people like that.
Haji.
So that was one. Then there was the influence of miniatures that came in at one stage. In structuring, when I moved away from a street level view and wanted to paint the city as a panoramic view, then the influence of high horizon and then multiple perspectives and the way in which various devices that the miniaturists have used to structure your work. So then the look changes, the work changes in that sense. It becomes more celebratory also in a sense. So those kind of stylistic changes. Then there have been others, I suppose, when one is painting more, for example in the drawings, which has been a parallel kind of activity for me. The relationship between the drawing and the painting has been a question that has always seemed to me to reveal itself in different ways. That many times the drawings flow into the paintings.
Oh, they do?
Yes. But many times there is things in the drawings that do not get translated into painting. That then the drawings remain as something else. Then I explore areas that can't get into painting.
Okay, so
and
those elements?
So those elements in the drawing remain separate. So the drawing, but also that you get into saying more personal things in drawings. So there again a stylistic change where you're not talking about society, you're not talking about other people, but you want to talk about yourself, sexuality, this, that, So then that becomes another way. So these are various kinds of things. Otherwise also other kinds of changes are to do with aging, to do with change of ideology, for example.
You're not a Marxist anymore?
I would say that I'm still a Marxist, but not in the sense that I was in the 70s. I still believe in the basic tenets, though also many of them are under scrutiny, and one has started to not to accept. But what has drawn one is, of course, that one is basically in sympathy with the overall view of a possible future, which is goes beyond class, caste, religion, and economic differences. Equal opportunities. Various people have formulated this in different liberal terms, democratic terms, but one has had sympathy to this basically left view. But one is no longer staunchly against certain things. One is more tolerant.
Yes.
And that happens with age, I suppose, but also happens with more experience. And you also see the dark side of commitment. The blinding that occurs, that you're so much committed to one view that you cannot accept another view. So that changes. So various things like that, family, grandchildren, they bring in a totally different, so all these things change you.
Sudhir, you were talking about projects earlier, that there were some projects that you continued, that okay, this is what I'm going to chronicle over the months or the years.
Yes.
So any such projects? Is the Lower Parel one a project of the abandoned mills and the chemicals and the toxins? Was that a project that was, because you go back to that again and again? So
I was when I went to Bombay first, I was staying in Lower Parel, doing my housemanship in a hospital called Mahatma Gandhi Hospital, which was an ESIS hospital. I do not know if you have an ESIS scheme in this state, but in Maharashtra it's the employment insurance scheme, employer and employee insurance scheme. So workers basically come under that. So I was working in that hospital, and I was living in that basically working class area. And that was the time when my commitment to the left was strong. And I saw one face of that area. After the mill strike, and especially then after the 90s, 10 years after the strike, the kind of gentrification of that area started. The mills were sold, and high-rise buildings, malls, various things started to come. And my initial response was a very angry rejection of what was happening. That was a working class area, and now all this changes are happening. There's a film that Anjali Montero and KP Jayashankar, two people, filmmakers from the Tata Institute of Social Science, did in around 2000, which is on a working class poet, Narayan Surve, and me, and the city of Bombay.
Okay, interesting.
So this this anger about what is happening to the working class area comes out more strongly in poetry, not in the painting so much, in the poetry. He's a working class poet who has seen this, who's lived with much senior to me. No longer, he died recently, a year and a half. So my position at that time, when I wanted to return to paint the Lower Parel area, around 2000. What was in my mind was that I've seen this area in the past, and now it's changing, and I want to see what's happening here. And of course, when I started this particular painting called Lower Parel, it was with the idea that I was going to paint a very anti-change in the sense of anti-gentrification painting. with anger and all that. As I started to paint it and moved, it dragged a lot, and as I said, that it ran into problems, and I couldn't get things right. But what did ultimately come out was that that anger in me was not, I could not authenticate that anger.
Okay.
So I had to find something else, and I realized that do I really want to be that angry about what is happening? The mills came into Bombay 100 and 150 years back. Before that, Bombay was different. The mills came, did their job, Bombay grew, and now they are going.
Yes.
And things will change, So people will live with this change, and the working class was living with that change.
Right.
Though, of course, there are injustices there, and they definitely have to be addressed. It's not like one is wanting to glide over those. But they are not going to be stuck with those, So the younger generation of mill workers were now moving to other jobs, service jobs, various things.
Yes.
So what you mentioned earlier about that these people don't seem to be like down and out, frustrated, because they want to move on with their life.
Yes.
So that is the sense that ultimately informed the painting and led to its resolution.
Okay.
So it was a struggle with myself, because I started with this idea that I need to be angry.
Ji.
And then
the perspectives must have changed and cleared so much in your own heart and head.
yes, yes and no.
Okay.
It's never totally resolved. Nothing is totally resolved. One has doubts, but yes, as a painting, it did resolve in that particular way.
Yes.
Okay.
And I wanted to talk to you about also the fact that you don't belong to any school of art, or you have not been trained in art, and it has also evolved over the years, and with time your own energies. Would things have been different if you were not in Mumbai? Would your paintings, do you think, feel different, look different? Would you be painting something else if you were in a city like Pune or Chandigarh or Banaras?
I think it would be majorly different, because I am a painter who draws from where I live, and also I need to paint where I live, in the sense that I cannot be a painter who
Not in isolation.
takes, not in isolation, and also not one who takes off from one city, goes to another place, gathers his impressions, and paints that city.
Okay, you can't do that.
I can't do that. So I have to be living there. It has to be a part of my daily life, and that's where I'm comfortable, what I'm comfortable talking about. So they would be very different. I cannot say how, I cannot imagine what they would be like, but surely they would be different. And about being self-taught,
Is there a disadvantage or an advantage?
I think there is a I think they're both, but I have been conscious of the disadvantages in certain particular situations. I love printmaking.
Okay.
Well, I can say that I love looking at prints. And I thought I would love printmaking, and I'd love to do printmaking, but I've never had a proper chance to do printmaking.
Gotcha.
Not belonging to an institution.
Haji.
And I've done a few when I have to take off for like 20 days and go to Hyderabad and work with Lakshma and make one etching. That's not possible to do all the time. Sometimes there are people in Thana now where there is a press where I did a few etchings. But if I had already trained myself as a printmaker, it would definitely have been easier. I could have done, and because I like the work of Kathy Kollwitz and German expressionists and things like that, woodcuts, this, that, I think I could have done much work in that area, but that opportunity has never come. And part of it is because I didn't go to art school.
Right.
I also love sculpture in a sense, and I've done a little bit of terracotta sculpture. I went to the JJ again and joined that kind of evening class, and then I went to Shantiniketan and stayed with KG and did some work there.
Okay.
But again, it had to be a very limited engagement, and so these are areas that if one had at a young age just learnt the techniques of these things, and if one felt at any point to return to that, one could have done it in an easier way.
Right.
Here one has to start with learning the basics. So those are disadvantages, but there are advantages too, in the sense that I don't have, as I'd like to put it, I don't have baggage of a particular art school. If I'm from Baroda, I have this particular viewpoint, these are the teachers, these are the works, so you can't like the other thing. If you're from JJ, you can't like Baroda, all these kind of things. I don't need to carry any of that baggage.
It's like a white canvas that you began on.
Yeah.
And talking about influences, you said literature influenced you a lot. Does it still influence you? Poetry, literature, does it still affect your art? Does the economy of art affect your work? Does the fact that you have to sometimes play to the gallery or to a certain audience, or sell your works, or be a selling painter, does that bother you? Because
I've
in
been
today's
lucky.
generation, it
I've
does.
been lucky. I've been very lucky, in fact, in the sense that whatever I was doing, when it first came to the notice of friends and the art world, it was accepted as it was, and I was taken in by good galleries.
Your first was with Alkazi ji.
With Alkazi, yeah.
So how did that was from theatre to painting, how that
No, Alkazi ran this gallery.
Okay, so he invited, okay.
So yeah,
okay.
so
that was your
people
first show.
Put in a good word, in the sense that they say that they told Alkazi that he should see my work.
Okay.
So I went to Delhi and showed him, and he immediately, and that is because of the kinds of people who spoke for me, Giv Patel, Geeta Kapoor. So I've been lucky in that sense, that I've never had to kind of struggle that much. It was easier in the 70s and 80s also. There are not that many painters.
And also the fact that you had a parallel career, did that help?
That helped me because I was not so bothered whether they were sold or not.
Yes, exactly. I'm sure that helps.
That helped a great deal, and it's been one of the things that I keep telling younger artists. It may be right or may be wrong, but I say, even if it's possible, don't be a freelance. Many people don't agree with this. If you're an artist, you should just be an artist, and society should support you. Okay, someday when this happens, it's fine. But till then, to put yourself into the odd situation where you have to struggle with yourself, maybe that slight change in the work is going to make it more accessible.
Absolutely.
It's not worth the risk.
Yes.
You spend your 6 hours, whatever, doing another job.
Right.
8 hours.
And the rest is
yours. I don't know. Maybe it's a little
but
romantic.
But you still follow that? Are you still practicing?
Well, now I'm lucky again, as I said, that after 2000 with the boom, I did well. Of course, now after 2006-07, it's been a plateau. So that's fine. But now I'm settled. I mean, so I don't need to now work.
And what
work as a radiologist.
Yes.
I did that for 30 years, which is not less.
It's a long time.
Yes.
So anything new that you're really working on these days, a new project in painting or a new series which you would like to talk about?
Well, as I said, I want to get back to painting the city. In between for 3-4 years, I moved, as I said, I moved back, and I painted family, I painted indoors people, I painted more intimate things about self and family. But I've always felt the need to get out there again. So that is what I'm trying to do right now.
So your new work will be
about the city of Bombay.
The city and the new Bombay probably.
The new Bombay, yes, exactly.
New people, I'm sure people, everything has...
many things have changed.
Many things have changed, yes.
That is a sense of collapse, in fact.
Are you angry?
Once, I mean, the way in which Calcutta has gone, the infrastructure has gone. Bombay is going the same way. Infrastructure is going to collapse. It's going to be a mess. People will continue to come there. People will continue to live. Whether things will get better or not, I cannot say. But that is how it is.
Right. Sudhirji, coming back to Chandigarh and this 4-day workshop that you had with 9 young artists, and
Yes.
tell us a little about your experience and what was the exact premise of the workshop, considering that you did not brief them or give any, well, you were not interested in the technical part of it, but probably the more surreal and the sensibility part of it, and probably the emotional sharing or the so what was the premise of the workshop and how was your experience?
Yes.
And also what were you looking for when you worked or supported these young artists?
Well, Diwan Manna has actually been after me for a few years to come to Chandigarh, and I've not been able to come before this. So when I accepted and he said it's going to be a workshop with MFA, post-MFA young artists, my first response was that I cannot give them anything in terms of technique. I'm not going to do a demo to show them
This is
how something is done, so that they know, okay, you can paint something like this. And I don't have like up my hand, up my sleeve, any of that.
Right.
And that's because a painter who's just taught himself what he wants to do. Then I thought, what is the weakest part of our art education?
Right.
And I come across this in Bombay with the JHA and many art schools that I visited. I have visited because I've been interested in art education, and I've tried to take shows to various cities, to various smaller places, and interact with art teachers, art students, various things.
Okay.
So the weakest part is a conceptual understanding of what it is that you are about. You make a choice, you come to an art school, graduate as a fine artist. Of course, 90% of them are looking for animation, advertising, whatever. But the 5 to 10% that are in fact looking to be fine artists, what is their idea about what they are going to be about? And very, very often they don't have clear ideas about this. And they don't have a clear idea of historical changes and what has happened to the art world itself. So my basic idea was to be able to talk to them and make them think about what they are doing. So I didn't want to say that, okay, let us all do this kind of work or that kind of work, or give them a subject or anything, and none of that. Let them do what they're doing. Let me see what they're about, and let me ask the kinds of questions about that work that they will start to ask themselves. So accepting the premise of what they've been doing, and then pushing it in directions in which, or not pushing it, but at least making them conscious of things. And towards that purpose, I kind of gave them, I collected from my readings and things like that. When I started thinking about it, I put together 8 texts, just a 1-page texts by various authors about art, and arranged them in a certain order, where from the beginning of modernism, abstraction and representation, then action painting, and then Duchamp and the idea and aesthetics, and then postmodernism. So in short, just to introduce them to some concepts, basic concepts that have figured in this whole discourse of the last 100 years.
Right.
And see and connect those to their work, so that they see that what they are doing actually has precedence. They decide to do something, or someone is taking cloth on canvas. What is the precedent? Where did it come from? Why did it come in? What was the first idea of doing this? So you are going to be carrying that with you when you do it. It's not an original thing in that sense. It's something that you can comment on it, you can do it, you can develop it, but you're carrying it with you. So that kind of dialogue And it's been very fruitful, I must say, that I enjoy that an hour and 15 minutes in the morning every day when they read the text the previous night or in the morning and come to class. So I have a class in the morning at 10 and we sit and I read it out again, and then we all discuss ideas that come to mind. So it's been very fruitful.
Okay. And which brings us also to the question of art education, and also that a lot of new things are happening in the art scene, you know, painting combining with installation and poetry and live film.
Yes.
So a lot of elements of art coming together. So
Yes.
does it, do you feel it, does it dilute or does it add to the value of art? And where do art schools fit in here in the new
Yes.
scenario? You know, it's sometimes
Yes, it's very difficult actually for
confusing
art
also.
schools also to devise a curriculum which can handle
yes, so much
what's changing in the outside art world.
right.
Certain art schools in the West have stuck to the idea that let's continue to give them the kind of basic academic education that then they may give up totally, you know, in their practice. But they've given them one body of knowledge,
Right.
you know, as a basis. It's like, okay, you read your Plato, and then you come to whatever Wittgenstein, whatever, you know, but you've done your Plato properly. So that kind of thing. Certain art schools have said, let's try to incorporate as much as possible. So they have, then the art student chooses, he wants to do film, he wants to do video, he wants to do painting, but he also wants to do performance. So all that is taught, you know. Each method has its plus points, minus points, you know, but it is a difficult situation, as you say.
Right.
As for whether what is happening, how do you look at it? Again, it's very difficult to judge, you know. In that sense, I think I'm a bit of a conservative.
Right.
I do not want to accept something till I'm thoroughly convinced.
Right.
Something new.
Right.
I'm probably more ready to accept painting because I've been with it for so long.
Right.
So, but I'm not. I look, definitely I look. And there have been some wonderful things in installation art, in video. Ranbir Kaleka is one example whose videos are absolutely fantastic. And Atul Dodia is one who's done some great work. And many people who have moved into new media. But there's also a lot of bad work.
Yes.
You know, a lot of hollow work.
Average, yeah.
Very hollow, pretentious. And because concept has got the kind of importance that it has now, the feeling that a complicated and complex concept itself becomes a work of art. If it's embodied or not doesn't matter. Unfortunately, but then of course there was always bad painting too, you know. So I suppose.
And where does the audience fit in this entire scenario? For instance, there are many people who feel intimidated to walk into a gallery and
Yes.
see a work of art because it has been put on a pedestal.
Yes.
You know, it doesn't reach out to people. In our schools, we have no curriculum which takes
That's
students
true.
to museums
That's true.
and demystifies art and not get it along with so many names and baggages.
Yeah.
So what do you think, is it wiser to begin at an early stage and probably not only groom artists but also groom audiences?
Absolutely.
To look at works of art with
It's absolutely essential.
passion and not necessarily technique and...
Yes, yes. The failure here is of our institutions. You know, Lalit Kala, National Gallery of Modern Art, we have few. But even those, and the museums also. Certain museums now are doing good work. But mostly they have not reached out to the public at large.
Right.
You know, they have not done enough. There's so much that can be done. And it should be done in a proper way. There are some terrible things that are done in the name of bringing children to the museum.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen in the National Museum in Delhi, there are like 100 students brought in, made to stand in a line and dragged along all the galleries. There's even a joke about that, that the teacher says, हाँ अभी सीधे कतार में चलो, इधर उधर मत देखो. So she's telling them, इधर उधर मत देखो in a museum, you know. So it's terrible, you know. So I mean, there's so much to be done, and it's absolutely essential. Galleries themselves, that is the reason why galleries in India have become more important.
Yes.
And many of them have done wonderful work. They are doing the work that normally institutions should be doing.
Right.
You know, you don't find in the West.
No.
In the West, they are definitely commercial in the total outlook.
Right.
You know, they don't bother to do any of the things that like
Gallery.
Vadera is doing or any of these other people are doing.
Right.
That Bodhi did for some time when he was on the scene.
Absolutely.
So galleries have seen that this needs to be done. They have to educate their own, even their clientele. So having classes for them, art education things, art appreciation. But much more has to be done.
And you feel that workshops like these add value to both the artist and the artist?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Artists, as you said, whether artists, and that too, that artists do need to speak about their work, try to be, you know, communicative and get beyond this barrier. The first move has to be from the artist. The audience, as you said, are intimidated by this big thing. So
Thank you, Sudhirji. It was wonderful speaking to you.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.